Hi, today's lesson is on literary elements of the short story. This video will cover characters, the narrator's point of view, as well as the conflict. Let's start with characters. To keep it simple, we'll say that in a story, there's always a good character and a bad character. In fact, to be more accurate, we should say that in stories, there's always a main character, a character that's more important, and an opposing character, a character that goes against the main character. We call the main character the protagonist, and the opposing character the antagonist. Now, to understand this concept, we'll take a look at a very famous story that everybody knows, the Little Red Riding Hood. Now in this story, who do you think the protagonist is? Well, of course, it's Little Red Riding Hood, because she's the main character. She's the character we see the most, and also the story revolves mainly around her. Now that we have identified the protagonist, who do you think the antagonist is? Of course, the wolf is. He is the antagonist because he works against Little Red Riding Hood. He wants to eat her. And by working against her, he's working against the main character, making him the antagonist. But could the antagonist be something else? Let's look at another story. To Build a Fire is a story by Jack London in which a man travels with a dog in freezing temperatures to reach a camp where he's supposed to meet with his friends. In this story, the protagonist is the man, but the antagonist is not the dog nor his friends. The antagonist here, the force that works against the man, is the cold. The cold that makes it so difficult for the man to reach the camp. So you see, antagonists can be human or non-human. Now, on the narrator's point of view, there are three categories of narrators. There's the first person, the third person, and the omniscient narrator. Now, when reading a story, one of the first things you want to do is analyze which type of narrator you're dealing with, because this will tell you just how much information and details you can get from this narrator. The first person narrator is part of the story, so he's one of the characters telling the reader what's happening. So anything you will discover will be through his eyes. The third person narrator is not involved in the story. He's only an observer. The story is then told using the subjects he, she, and they. And finally, the omniscient narrator is one that knows everything from the story. He can report on all characters at all time and also provide you with insight on the characters' past, present, and future. So now remember, first person is part of the story, so you will see subjects like we and I. The third person is an observer, so you will read subjects like he, she, and they. And finally, omniscient knows everything, so you should know a little bit about all characters, whether they're main characters or secondary characters. Here for conflicts, again, there are three types of conflicts. Here I have to say that the term man does not refer to a male character, but simply to a human being. Okay, so man against man is a conflict in which both the protagonist and the antagonist are human beings. A good example of that is Batman against the Joker. The second type of conflict, man against nature, is when your protagonist is a human being again, but the antagonist can be nature itself, so the wind, cold, heat, a storm, but also animals. So the example I wanted to bring up now is, again, the Little Red Riding Hood. So there you have it, men against nature. And finally, man against himself is when, of course, again, the protagonist is a human being, but the problem, the struggle, is within himself. He or she, the protagonist, has to battle internal conflicts in order to succeed. So what I thought would be a good example of a man against himself conflict is the Academy Award winner, The King's Speech, in which the king fights his own stuttering to be able to address his population properly. So there you have it, 3 literary elements: characters, narrative's point of view, and conflicts.